will be the Soviet Soyuz. Earlier this morning, the Russians transmitted television pictures of the arrival of the two cosmonauts at the launch site at Baikonur. It is in the desert about 1,400 miles southeast of Moscow. The two cosmonauts are Alexei Leonov and Valeri Kubasov, both of them veterans of previous Soviet space flights, and their liftoff is scheduled for just about an hour and a quarter from now. Good morning again. We are back now at half past the hour on today. You are looking at a live satellite picture from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the Soviet Union. And here at the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, Florida, I'm Jim Hartz, along with John Chancellor. This live picture from the Soviet Union. Soviet spacecraft, the Soyuz, is scheduled to lift off within this hour, about 50 minutes from now. It'll be followed this afternoon by the launching of an Apollo spacecraft from Florida, and the two will rendezvous and dock in space later this week in a major symbolic expression of détente between the United States and the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union to televise its space shot is unprecedented, and in this half hour we'll be talking with our NBC News correspondent in Moscow, John Dancy, about this. We'll also be joined here at the Kennedy Space Center by Alan Shepard, who in 1961 became the first American to travel in space. Jim?
The two Soviet cosmonauts, Alexei Leonov and Valeri Kubasov, arrived at the Baikonur launch pad on schedule this morning. They emerged smiling from their bus and moved toward the elevator that would carry them to their spacecraft at the top of the 150-foot rocket. They were greeting members of the Soviet commission overseeing the launch. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Good luck," and Leonov replied with what we're told is the customary response, which translates as "to the devil." With good weather prevailing, their liftoff is scheduled in about 45 to 50 minutes from now.
Good weather and high spirits are evident here in Florida, too, as the countdown continues for this afternoon's Apollo launch. The three astronauts, Thomas Stafford, Vance and Donald Slayton, will see the Soviet launch on videotape this morning after sleeping late. President Ford will watch the Soyuz liftoff at the State Department Auditorium in Washington, along with the Soviet ambassador, Anatoly Dobrinin. Dobrinin then will travel down here to Florida to see the launch of the Apollo out there, but the president will stay in Washington.
The United States ambassador to the Soviet Union, Walter Stessel, is at the Baikonur launch site with a group of American technicians, and this is the first time that Americans have ever been invited or allowed to be on hand for a Soviet launch. American newsmen, however, are barred from the site, and they are watching from a television center in Moscow.
Control Center speaking. Prior to the launch, there is 2 hours and 46 minutes left. To the Baikonur launch pad site, there has arrived the bus with the crew of the Soyuz, the commander Alexei Leonov, and flight engineer Valeri Kubasov. The bus was made at the Moscow bus factory and is made especially for transporting the crew to the launch site. And within the bus there is a vacuum system whereby one can remove the dust within the bus and keep it clean. Within the bus, the bus has wide windows installed, and the windows are darkened to prevent sun's rays from actually penetrating too brightly. The bus also has pneumatic type support.
Apollo will do all of the work in the final stages of rendezvous, making various maneuvers to bring the ship into position for docking with the Soyuz, and that will happen over West Germany. They will stay linked together for 2 days, visiting one another's spacecraft, exchanging gifts, eating meals together, performing joint experiments. The Russians will return to Earth next Monday, the Americans on the following Thursday. John Chancellor is going to give us a look now at the men who will be aboard. John?
Well, as you know, Jim, the Soyuz is just over half as large as the Apollo, and it has a crew of only 2 instead of 3. The Soyuz pilot is Alexei Leonov. He is 41 years old, a former military pilot and an expert parachutist. He's been a cosmonaut since 1960. In 1965, Leonov left the Voshchod 2 in space and took the world's first spacewalk. His flight engineer is Valeri Kubasov, who at 40 years old is the youngest man in the Apollo-Soyuz mission, not by much. He was trained in aviation design and has published scientific research papers, and he became a cosmonaut in 1966. The American Apollo craft is commanded by Thomas Stafford, who is 44 years old and a pilot. He's been in space 3 times and passed within 9 miles of the moon aboard Apollo 10. Brigadier General in the Air Force, and at 6 feet, he is the tallest man among the 5 who will, presumably, if all goes well, be flying today. Piloting the Apollo Command Module is a civilian, 44-year-old Vance Brand, who was a Lockheed test pilot before becoming an astronaut in 1966. He's been assigned to several backup crews, but never before has been in space. And finally, the docking module pilot, Donald Deke Slayton, he was among the first 7 American astronauts chosen in 1959. But because of a heart condition, now corrected, he's never flown a mission. At 51 years of age, he will be the oldest man ever to go into space, and one of the better men, I think.
With John and me now is Eugene Cernan, who was the last man to walk on the moon. Gene has been a special consultant, liaison man with the project director. You were telling me a while ago you had been to Russia 5 times?
Jim, in the last 18 months, going over there both with the crew or with the management technical team, it's been 5 times in 18 months, each 3-week periods.
Gene, you were quoted earlier as saying that there were many squabbles on how things were going to be done, and there was even some fist pounding on tabletops. What was that all about?
Oh, I guess I perhaps used the word squabbles, but you know, I've always said I think one of the most important aspects of this entire flight is what has gone on for the last 2 to 3 years, and that's learning to work, learning to solve differences across the table, and some of those differences are the kind that you have to pound your fist on the table and say, you know, we've got customs and traditions in our country, and this is what we believe in, and so you end up either having to do something in a way which it can be done no other way because you've done it that way in the past, or compromising, and that went in both directions, and I think that's really the meat of this entire program.
Gene, were there any human differences in the sense of, you were speaking about different cultural backgrounds. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, of course, everyone is an individual, whether you're Russian or American, and on an individual basis, we developed some tremendous personal and professional and family relationships. What you find out that the experience, your training, your background tends to lead you in certain directions in terms of belief, in terms of how you think things should be done, for instance, technically, excluding the political end of it for a minute. And yes, there are differences.
Were you able to exclude the politics from your discussions?
I think we were for the most part, because our desires, such as particular tests we felt had to be proved that were done on a Soyuz to talk, for one thing, about safety aspects or other things, were things that we felt had to be done strictly because of our background, our approach to mission operations, things that we knew had to be done based upon our technical experience in going to the moon. But on the other hand, let's face it, we are involved in a political, if you will, political flight, a flight of détente, and although we tried to exclude politics, we had some very interesting, at least myself with some of the cosmonauts, some very interesting discussions, off the cuff, friendly differences of opinion, yes, but we were able to talk about it.
Have you emerged from this with a different view toward the Soviet government, the Soviet system, toward communism, if you will?
No, I didn't go in with it with any design, with any feeling than I would. I think, if anything, I have a stronger feeling towards them as people, as individuals, because of the friendships I've developed, but I've even perhaps got a stronger feeling towards the credibility and a kind of government under which we have here in the United States. And I perhaps am a little bit more of a supporter, if you will. I'm more of a flag waver now that I've seen a little bit of the other side of the coin.
Gene, when they were ahead of us back in the 60s, Gagarin and some of the others, Colonel Leonov's pilot, as a matter of fact, on Bushgard, they were always quoted as saying, our successes in space show that bourgeois science and technology are obviously inferior to communist science and technology. Did you get any of that from any of them?
No, we really avoided, in my two classifications of dealings over there with the cosmonauts, we avoided most of those kind of things. We talked about our experience. You know, Leonov and I have both walked in space, and we compared some of those things. He would talk to me about details which were perhaps not otherwise discussed before, based upon our own individual feelings and experience. But we didn't really try and compare with each other the capabilities, good or bad, or plus or minus, of each spacecraft. And in technical discussions, we only compared the differences in the capabilities of the two spacecraft where a function had to be performed and which one could perform it better. In the case of when the two spacecraft are docked, Apollo will handle the entire control and navigation of the two spacecraft because it has more propellant and it has a better, I don't want to say better, a control system which is capable of handling the two spacecraft together, whereas a Soyuz really doesn't have that kind of performance in its attitude control system.
Well, gee, this has been one of the criticisms of the flight, that the Americans, in a way, are doing all of the difficult parts of the mission. In other words, the Soviets launched this morning, go into an orbit, perform one or two small maneuvers to circularize that. And then everything else depends on the United States. All of the rendezvous maneuvers, you know, all of the most critical parts of the flight. In the beginning, this flight was billed as, it would give the two countries the capability to rescue each other if there was a problem in space. And yet, the Soviets can't bring the Americans back, but we can bring them back, and so on and so on. I guess what I'm really asking here is, are we getting the short end of the stick in this flight?
I don't think so. I think the flight plan and the operations within it was developed on the background and experience and the capability of the two spacecraft. They're vastly different. You know that. I know that. Apollo was built for a different purpose, one which required perhaps more sophisticated gear. But nonetheless, that's where we are, and we've just put the two together and said which one, which crew, which spacecraft can better handle certain situations. And we came up with this particular flight plan where we are doing the dynamics of the rendezvous.
Very briefly, are we giving away technology in this flight?
No, I don't. You know, technology we're flying with today is technology we've been flying with for the last 10 years. And you can get that by sending $1.25 to the government printing office.
Wasn't that zip code?
We've learned a lot, though, about them and their operations.
Eugene Cernan, thank you very much. We must pause now for a station break. To their own citizens and to the world. This is the first time they've ever done that. We are looking at a picture now inside the mission control room, the Soviet mission control room in Moscow. And John Chancellor, who's with us this morning, and astronaut Alan Shepard, who has also joined us this morning. And I want to put some questions now about the Soviet coverage to NBC News correspondent John Dancy, who is in Moscow. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Jim. I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but I'm told we're having some difficulty with your picture. And we're looking at a picture now of the Moscow Control Center. Can you tell us anything yet about how the Russian people are responding to the television coverage?
Well, there's been a great deal of reaction to the fact of seeing live television of a launch. People have just never seen anything like this before. And it's been getting a big publicity build-up here. It is being seen on television. The build-up really started on television over the weekend when we first began seeing pictures from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. And people are quite excited about it. They know the difference. They understand the difference between videotape and live. They understand that what they've seen in the past has been videotape or film, and what they're about to see now is the event as it actually takes place.
Are you seeing or will they see later today the Apollo launch here from Florida?
Yes, they will. There's a very expensive television hookup between the two sides. What is being seen on Moscow television and from the Moscow control room is going to Houston, and what is being seen in Houston is coming back here over two different satellite hookups, and so the people will see the launch as it takes place.
I'm told we're going to have some pictures from Moscow and may get a picture from inside the Soviet spacecraft. That's inside the control center in Moscow, and they are looking, as we are looking, at a picture of the Soyuz spacecraft at Baikonur, 1,400 miles southeast of Moscow. There is another first on this flight. Besides being able to see the Soviet launch live for the first time, we will see live pictures from inside the Soyuz spacecraft at launch, and we will also see for the first time live pictures from inside the Apollo spacecraft at launch. Al, would that make a man's job more difficult being watched during the launch phase? He's got enough to do it.
I would think that during the launch phase, a live television camera would certainly be the least of their worries. It'll all be set up ahead of time, focused, and running automatically, and I'm sure their attention will be devoted to the things that are associated with the rocket, what might go wrong during the launch phase itself.
It's quite clear that both sides want as much coverage as they can get on this flight. On the two spacecraft in orbit, when they're linked up, there will be 4 television cameras. We'll be back after this message. Arms are coming down.
This is something that we, if I interpret that picture accurately, they don't do it the way we do it. Their arms retract in a different way. Ours swing back, as you've seen a number of times at the Kennedy Space Center here with the Apollo system.
John, actually, we have used this system before in the Gemini launch vehicles during the manned launch, where we had the one supporting umbilical pivoted like that and swung back as these are doing.
It does appear up on the side of the launch vehicle they do have what would be the equivalent of swing arms. Umbilicals. Is that what that is? Umbilicals?
Yeah, they'll probably fall away.
Fuel lines, electrical connections.
There is one decided difference, however, and that is the fact that they assemble their launch vehicle in the horizontal position inside the hangars, and they're rolled out just a few days before launch. Whereas, of course, ours come out considerably before launch and stay in the vertical position for the testing phase.
I saw part of this, a picture of it on a railroad car not long ago.
Yes, coming out in the horizontal position.
Is that a pretty good rocket? Put it in a very simple terms.
Well, of course, like our rocket, it is an older rocket. Yesterday's spacecraft, if you want to call it that. But yet it has performed remarkably well in the job for which it was designed. As you may know, the word Soyuz, union, means that it was designed for a union with a laboratory. It has performed this union several times. It has also performed this union with other Soyuz vehicles. Back in 1969, I believe, they had 3 vehicles in the air at one time. It's a multi-engine vehicle, but it has performed reasonably well for the task for which it was designed.
This is the Soviet Mission Control Center. Moscow time is 15 hours, 15 minutes. Everything is ready at the Cosmodrome for the launch of the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz. 5 minutes remaining for launch. Onboard systems are now under onboard control. The right control board of the cosmonauts, which is opposite the commander's couch, is now turned on. The cosmonauts have strapped themselves in and reported that they are ready. They have lowered their faceplates. The key for launch has been inserted. The last stage before launch is completed. Now the commander is reporting that everything is in order on board and the crew is ready for launch. This is Moscow Mission Control.
Although when they do give you an announcement from Moscow Mission Control, which is not in Moscow, it's in Kaliningrad, they sound remarkably like our own. As the press kit they put out was remarkably like the NASA press kit, and I think this is one of the many similarities that the Russians have learned, or the adaptations they've made in their own system. That picture you're looking at now is about 10,000 miles from Cape Kennedy. It's 1,400 miles southeast of Moscow in a parched and absolutely arid desert. The temperature there was 110 degrees the other day.
When some of the astronauts were talking to the cosmonauts a couple of days ago, the boys were complaining about the fact not only was it hot, but they drained their swimming pool for some reason, so they had no place to cool off.
We saw a moment ago in the Russian control center, there was an American flag and a sign indicating that that was the home base for the American team. There is a team of technicians, engineers, and astronauts from the United States in the Soviet Mission Control Center. They're not right on the floor. They're in a separate room, but very close by. There are straight lines from the Moscow Control Center to the Mission Control Center here in the United States, so the communication lash-up is complicated but necessary in this. The language difficulties, which were seemingly insurmountable in the beginning, have all now been solved. The trouble they had was not in finding translators, but in finding translators who could understand and pick up the technical jargon that makes understanding what we always call NASA-ese sort of like understanding a foreign language. So the person who was going to be a translator in this almost had to understand 3 different languages or 4 different languages. We got another announcement here.
2 minutes left before launch of the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz. The commands to pressurize the fuel tanks have been given. The fuel has been also, the booster has been full. Now, the booster tanks, the oxidizer tanks on the booster rocket are being vented. 1.5 minutes remaining before launch. Before launch. The key for launch has been turned. The fueling tower has been removed. 30 seconds before launch. The launch command has been given. Telemetry registry equipment has been turned on. Also, the onboard control systems of the registration equipment here. Ignition. The engines are powered up. The launch. The booster is off. Moscow time, 15 hours, 20 minutes, 10 seconds. The flight is proceeding normally. The program maneuver of the booster rocket has been given. 20 minutes into flight. The flight is normal. The engine is operating in a stable manner. There's a slight movement of the booster oscillation. 30 seconds. The flight is proceeding normally. 40 seconds. The flight is normal. 70 seconds of flight of the booster of the Soyuz spacecraft. The first stage has been passed, on which maximum acceleration is encountered. The speed, the velocity has exceeded 500 meters per second. Slight overloads are being felt by the crew. 100 seconds into the flight, the rocket is proceeding in a stable manner. The crew is reporting from on board the spacecraft. – 120 seconds into the flight. The first stage side segments have separated. The speed is over 1.5 kilometers per second. The second stage engines are operating in a stable manner. Slight overload is being felt by the crew. Seconds into the flight. The emergency jettison systems, rescue system has been jettisoned. The cover and shrouds have separated. The crew is reporting from on board the spacecraft. The second stage engines are operating. Seconds into the flight. The booster is stable. The speed is now over 3 kilometers per second. – 320 seconds. The flight is normal. Seconds into the flight. Stabilization of the third stage. The third stage is stable. Pressure in the burning chamber, in the combustion chamber of the third stage is within normal limits. Velocity of the booster rocket has now exceeded 4.5 kilometers per second. Altitude of the spacecraft, in accordance to the program, is about 190 kilometers. The distance from the launch pad is about 700 kilometers. This is Soviet Mission Control Center. Moscow time is 15 hours, 58 minutes. The Soyuz spacecraft is in orbital flight. According to radio trajectory data, which has been Received from the Ulan-Ude, Ussurisk, and Kolpasheva ground tracking stations. The preliminary orbit has been established preliminarily for the first orbit. Maximum altitude 220.8 kilometers, minimum 185.7 kilometers. 88.49 minutes orbital time. The program of the flight for the first orbit has been nominal. At the present time, the crew of the Soyuz spacecraft is performing the following operations. Monitoring the pressure integrity of onboard systems. Monitoring the status of spacecraft systems. This is Moscow Mission Control Center.